much. Welcome, everybody, and thank you very much for attending this Skill Me Up expert talk on using Azure Security Center for policy and regulatory compliance. My name's Dwayne Natwick. I am the instructor for this talk, and I am a senior cloud training architect at Opsagility and Skill Me Up with 30 years of industry experience as well as multiple Azure and 365 role-based certifications. I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer and I'm a regional lead for the program. And you can find me on the links provided on the slide via email, my blog site, as well as social media locations. So in this session, we will cover Azure policies and initiatives and how they can be used to create rules to control your organizational governance from subscriptions and resources. And then we'll talk about the role that Azure Security Center can play in the review and auditing of policy and compliance controls. And we'll also talk about how to monitor and maintain policy and compliance within your environment using Azure with Azure Security Center as well as Azure Sentinel. So before discussing Azure Security Center, let's understand what policies and initiatives are within the Azure environment. Azure policies are what can be used to govern cost, security, and jurisdiction for your organization's infrastructure. As we'll see when we go into the demo, Azure has hundreds of built-in pre-built policies that are based on best practices that you can assign to monitor and manage your subscriptions as well as your resources within the Azure environment, as well as some non-Azure resources as well, such as you can utilize it for virtual machines and whatnot that aren't necessarily on the Azure environment. Initiatives take it a step further where they are made up of a group of policies. And there are, again, many pre-built initiatives within Azure to easily configure for your subscription and resource groups for regulatory governance, as we'll see again when we pop into the demo. Assigning initiatives to resources will then audit those resources for compliance and provide the ability to remediate those resources for compliance. Monitoring and reviewing the compliance to these resources can be done through Azure Policy as well as Azure Security Center, which we'll show as well later on. And when we're talking about compliance and regulatory compliance, we talk a lot about various attestations that are in the Azure environment. And Microsoft holds many cloud attestations that are for their buildings and infrastructure, and a lot of those are here on the slide. It's important to understand that these attestations mean that the organization has a level of compliance for the buildings and infrastructure that they're moving workloads to into Azure. But if you require regulatory compliance, Azure helps to assist in putting you on the path to adhere to those requirements because they already hold these attestations on their buildings and infrastructures. But it's important to note, though, that compliance goes beyond these attestations held by Azure and other cloud providers. So there's processes and procedures and controls that fall into and are part of all of those audit guidelines. So what you have the ability to do using Azure Security Center for monitoring, as well as the policies and initiatives within Azure Policy, is to start to audit your resources based on what your requirements are for regulatory compliance. And we'll show some of these attestations and these control compliance processes when we step into some of the initiatives and how you can use Azure Security Center as that compliance that compliance and auditing factor to help get you in the place that you need to be when you're doing either a self audit of your compliance, or if you have auditors come into your environment and require a certain for a certain regulatory compliance or GDPR. If you're in America, HIPAA, NIST, those type of things. So let's talk a little bit more then about the different governance areas, and we'll start with organizational governance. So organizations have challenges that arise within a cloud environment when they're being created that may affect the cost, security, or regulatory jurisdictions. Governing your environment for financial, business, and security will be discussed a little bit deeper in the next slides, but it's important to understand the role that Azure can play in assisting you in monitoring and managing this governance. And as we stated, Azure governance or Azure policies are created, assigned, and utilized to govern the resources within your Azure subscription. And then these policies can be assigned using the built-in policies within Azure, or we can create custom policies that can be created that may be necessary for your specific organizational needs. And we'll look at these policies in a deeper look when we go into our demo. Policies should be assigned at the beginning of building your environment, but they can also be retroactively created. So if you are, a startup organization or just moving into the cloud, and you don't turn on policies at the initial onset of going into the cloud, but then go, oh no, I've got to adhere to GDPR or some other regulatory compliance, and you turn on that policy or initiative, or you create a policy for certain things, it will audit existing resources that fall into the scope and return how you are, and then return how valid you are in being compliant to that particular scope. And then you can remediate anything that falls into the red category. So when you're putting those policies in place, it's important to understand what your organization's requirements are, what the requirements are maybe of your partners and people you're doing business with, as well as what you require in terms of security and financial decisions within your environment as well. When we'll talk about a little bit briefly about financial governance, but since this is more of a compliance and security and regulatory type discussion, we're not going to get deep into this, but you can use policies in Azure Security Center to monitor the financial and cost governance and cost and billing. But you can also use other tools such as Azure Advisor for that, and provide spending limits and controls that can be put in place for your subscription and resources. Policy allows you to define and put controls into specific SKUs or locations that are allowed within storage accounts, virtual machines, VPN gateways. That'll help you control those costs as well. And that helps to then avoid deployment of resources in expensive areas or areas that might be out of compliance and those type of things. So when securing and protecting resources within the environment, this is where policies become really important, and Azure has many built-in policies for security available. These policies provide guidance for configuring policies for virtual machine guests, SQL databases, networking, monitoring, as well as Security Center. What we'll discuss on the next slide, enabling compliance controls and policies can audit resources for specific regulatory requirements that also include a number of security controls. As we review these initiatives, and you look through and review the initiatives, you may find that auditing against one of the policies, such as in the United States, the NIST SP 800-53, could provide you with a strong security baseline for controls within your entire environment, as well as put controls in place that may help you with other regulatory compliances or organizational and security policies as well. And when searching on the term security, you'll find a lot of helpful initiatives and helpful policies within Azure Policy, such as auditing VMs for security baseline settings, auditing VMs with insecure password settings, and those type of things. Both of those initiatives protect exposure of resources and allow an administrator to be proactive to potential vulnerabilities within your environment. And as I've stated, you can monitor and review compliance to to many of these policies within both Azure Policy as well as Azure Security Center. We'll show some of that when we get into the Azure portal. If a resource is non-compliant, they're identified, and you have the ability right from the dashboard to look at what needs to be remediated and take care of the steps, or also to be able to in some cases click a fix button right in the portal and remediate that right from there, such as deploying an agent on a VM if it's not being monitored, things like that. Azure Security Center is that central source for monitoring controls for data, network, identity, and threat protection. As we talk about security governance, business governance also is somewhat related, and both are very much focused on protecting the continued operation of the business. And in terms of business governance, we've talked a lot about those attestations and the regulatory compliances, and the policies within Azure help to assign those to ensure that resources are created without violating any business governance requirements, such as, we mentioned GDPR, NIST 853, all of those have initiatives in there for those controls. And those built-in policies and initiatives are, for allowed locations, can also be created over an entire subscription and can be assigned to resource groups to segment jurisdiction, especially when we're talking about GDPR and the need for to have your resources within a certain sovereignty. That's where policies can help to avoid people coming behind you and that may not have as deep of a understanding of what the organizational and business governance policies are to create resources that violate those policies. And within those built-in policies, there are dozens of initiatives, more and more being added by Microsoft on a regular basis in that category of regulatory compliance. And they're made up of, as we stated before, a group of policies and controls that can help to get you to that level of standardization and compliance and get you ahead of the game before an auditor might come into your environment and hit you with fines because you're out of scope and out of compliance with something. If you find that an initiative within the Azure environment does not fully suit the requirements of your organization, you can clone those initiatives and policies and adjust them as a custom initiative for your organization as well. So there's a lot of flexibility within there also. And when you select an initiative, you can view the policy that's assigned and look at what those policies are within there, so that if you're creating that custom initiative, if you need to make some adjustments to it and you clone that, you can remove those policies as needed. For example, if you select the NIST 800-53 initiative, there are close to 800 policies that make up the auditing and controls that are part of that initiative. So that may not be as necessary for your business to have all 800 of those policies within your environment and be monitoring all 800 of those policies. You may only have a subset of that for your particular needs. So that's where custom policies really come into play. It's important to note that not all policies are restricted to Azure resources. I stated this before. For example, most of the policies and what feeds into these policies is Azure Monitor services and log analytics. Feed that information that is then being used by Policy and Security Center to gather information and look at the activities and diagnostics and configuration settings of these resources. Well, Azure Monitor, you can very easily push that agent out to non-Azure virtual machines. Again, as well with Network Watcher, you can utilize Network Watcher for watching network traffic and on not on outside of the Azure environment as well. So you have the ability then to bring Security Center into your entire ecosystem from a hybrid standpoint and utilize those policies and initiatives to govern not just your Azure environment. So let's talk about the sections of Azure Security Center before we move into taking a look live at the Azure portal. So Azure Security Center provides a local centralized source where much of the data that's collected, as I stated on the previous slide, for activity and service logs and everything being fed from Azure Monitor and Log Analytics go into that Security Center dashboard. And that information includes, the identity and access and role-based access control roles and MFA, how our identity management is set up within our environment, um, update management, analytics, advanced threat protection. All of this goes into Azure Security Center, and Azure Security Center is broken into three sections: the policy and compliance, the resource security hygiene, and then threat protection. And when we get into the portal, you'll be able to see a little bit more of that. There are two different subscription levels for Security Center. There's free, which everybody gets right off the bat. The policy for Azure Security Center is put into place when you create your subscription, and it's there, and it runs, and it provides you with certain things like the Azure Secure Score and does certain assessments and security recommendations based on base level best practices within the Azure environment. So it's very helpful from a base level just to get you started and understand where you might stand within your Azure environment or even other resources outside of that. For the deeper analysis features that we're going to show, especially the main topic of this discussion is around regulatory compliance and governance. You need the standard subscription for that, and that provides the regulatory compliance dashboard and reports on your and recommendations on how to build up your controls that are required for certain regulatory compliance initiatives. In addition, it has different levels of security controls that are also recommended controls within any environment, such as just-in-time virtual machine access, which will allow you to open up RDP or SSH ports for accessing a virtual machine on a time-based access level, rather than creating a rule to have those open in perpetuity. So you need to make sure that the standard tier and turning that on helps to allow to create more security within your environment as well, and secure that environment and govern that environment. Provide that dashboard again to show you how you're doing in terms of the policies and initiatives you have in place, as well as best practices within the Azure environment. So just to reiterate, the compliance to policies and initiatives within Azure Policy all feed into Azure Security Center. And then Azure Security Center acts as a guide to assigning policies and controls through recommendations that are based on those regulatory controls and industry best practices. And when you enable that standard subscription for Azure Security Center, there are 4 regulatory standards that are immediately enabled, and those are the Azure CIS standard, PCI DSS, which is the credit card standard within the United States, ISO 27001, and then SOC TSP. So if you're international outside of the U.S., you probably PCI DSS might not be a issue for you, but one thing that it could provide for you is some good standards and controls if you're running an e-commerce site and you're utilizing credit card information from your customers and storing that information. PCI DSS has controls in place that follow the protection of personal identifiable information within your environment, so that helps out. You probably, Azure CIS is really a baseline policy based on Azure best practices, and then the SOC-based TSP around SOC compliance, and then ISO, the international standards. So if your organization requires other standards, though, there's other standards as well, and we'll show you where some of those are, how to find them, how to enable them, and how to utilize those within the Azure Security Center as well. Within the policy service definitions, there's a specific category for Security Center policies that can also be assigned. And like I said, when you create your subscription, the base policy for the free subscription actually goes into and is enabled right in Azure Policy by default. And then we'll look at your overall secure score as well, because then it takes all this information and stirs it up in a pot and provides a secure score for your organization to kind of follow by and understand how you rate versus industry best practices based on the information, based on the Azure policies and the best practices for securing your environment. I've said this multiple times, but Azure Security Center is a central source for the overall security health of your organization's environment and can provide this for your business and security governance. From the central dashboard, you can then drill down to areas of policy non-compliance and then remediate those resources directly from within Azure Security Center, or it will provide direction to you in terms of how to remediate those issues and what you need to do and what your next steps are to get that back into a healthy state. So what do we do then to monitor and manage compliance? And we've talked a lot about, certain, the services and getting all of that into place, but where do we take that from there? And so what we look at here then is how within our Azure policy do we govern and audit the existing resources and how they're compliant. And within Azure policy, we have this remediation location right within Azure policy. Azure Security Center, again, you can review all this within Azure Security Center as well. So when a resource is non-compliant, you need to identify then and resolve that issue through remediation. And within the remediation dashboard in policy, there's a list. You have a list of policies, and you can review right there what your compliance state is. As you can see on the slide, there's a column right there that says, you can see that the ASC default is that policy or that initiative that's put in place as soon as you create your subscription around Azure Security Center. And you can see that in the screenshot, it's non-compliant, and it's not hugely non-compliant. It's at a 98%. There are 4 resources, however, or four resources my uh, out of my resources that are non-compliant to 22 policies. So you can look at that and then click down and find out what those resources are, what you need to do that. A lot of times I get non-compliance, and we'll see that when we go into the dashboard because of certain things that I have in my demo environment. One of the things is I have a personal external email address that is a global administrator that Azure Security Center flags every time and does not like at all. So I get a lot of that. I get that I don't have all of my users on MFA as a knock on my secure score. So you get you get some of those things when you're working in a demo environment or dev environment. You may get some of those, but when you're working in a production environment, it provides a lot of great information to help you build your security posture up to a strong and secure level. So let's look at some of those sections that we were talking about. We'll go a little deeper into it in a few minutes, but uh, we can see, within Azure Security Center, when we select compute and resources and the screenshots on the slide, within the security dashboard, you're taken to the recommendations. Within this area, there's an overview of what the severity gaps are, whether they're healthy, they're medium, they're high, they're low, in terms of what the security is within here. And among the recommendations, you can see monitoring agent health, disk encryption, network traffic agent deployment. And if you look at the slide, I mentioned this previously, some of these recommendations actually have this quick fix button that pops up in blue, where you can just click that button, click enable, and be done. It will push out that fix, that remediation, that control will be enabled, and you'll be ready to go. So it's very helpful from that standpoint. If it doesn't have that, and you click deeper into the recommendation, it will provide you also with the list of remediation steps, links to Microsoft Docs for more information as to why, what you're about to do, and all of those type of things as well. Besides just using alerts and log search alerts in log analytics, the Azure Security Center also has a topic specifically dedicated to security alerts. This topic provides a near real-time view of security incidents that are occurring. It can provide you with incidents, accounts, what the source is of the information, and can provide you even if you have malware on a VM. So it gives you places where you can then investigate alerts within Azure Security Center, as well as within Azure Sentinel. And it's all within this real-time view, provides that general information. And again, provides remediation steps if those actions are known by Azure, and allows you to also provides further investigation capabilities within those environments. Now, I mentioned Azure Sentinel a couple times. Azure Sentinel ties really tightly with Azure Security Center, and if your organization has never implemented or run a security information and event management system, which as an acronym is known as SIEM, uh, Azure Sentinel is a great way to get into uh, that security operations center type posture within your organization, which is very important. One of the great things around Sentinel is it's built on Azure Cognitive Services and provides threat analytics, and takes that enormous Microsoft threat database and feeds information into Azure Sentinel, and will use information from Azure Security Center in terms of what what compliances and policies we're complying with, as well as taking all of those logs and analyzing activity logs and looks for anomalies and things of that nature where we need to then investigate any type of suspect activity within your environment. Maybe a user has admin rights, and all of a sudden they're logging in and downloading a bunch of information. We want to know about that, right? And see what's going on. And at the center of all of this is all of the data sources and everything that feeds into Azure Security Center as well as Azure Sentinel. So at the right here is Azure policy and all of the services and resources within our Azure environment or outside environments that feed into Azure Security Center. And then we have more of our ecosystem, such as information protection, Azure Active Directory, which also could have an arrow to Security Center as well, Office 365 services, and then third-party security services and AWS can all feed into Azure Sentinel as well. So that helps then to govern your entire ecosystem and provide you with that security and compliance, not just within the Azure infrastructure, but in your entire organization. So let's jump into the Azure environment. So I'm in one of my Azure subscriptions right now. I'm going to jump into another one to show you something else as well. But let's look at Azure Security Center within this environment. So you can very easily type security right up here, and Security Center comes on. Since I was on this recently, it's right in my recent services. So when I go into Security Center, it's going to open up and it's going to provide me with this great dashboard of information. And you can see here, of 10 of 55 points, I'm at 18% for my secure score. If you're running a production environment with a lot of other a lot of resources within there, hopefully you're higher than 18%. But because this is just a demo environment, I break down, I build resources on a regular basis within here for demoing. You can see my secure score is really bad. Over here, you have a lot of other information within here. We have networking, which again provides a network map that you can review right in here. Let me just put allow traffic in here. Oh, select all. And let me refresh. I did have something popping up in there. There we go. So here you can see in my network map, if I had a big environment, it's going to show all my virtual machines, and it might give me an alert here. And you can see I'm getting an alert on this virtual machine. If I click on it, you can see my security health. I am getting 3 bad recommendations here. The reason for that is when I set up this virtual machine, I intentionally turned on and opened the RDP port. So to exactly show this this security issue. So you can see here, it's telling me close my management port. So it's telling me close RDP. All network ports should be restricted by my network security group. Again, that's telling me I need to have a restrictive rule for port 3389, and then just-in-time network access should be applied instead, which is what I said. What just-in-time network access, just-in-time virtual machine access does is it opens a time-based rule in the NSG for port 3389 or port SSH port 22, depending on whether you're working on Windows or Linux, to have that management access into that port. And you can restrict that access to a specific IP address and restrict that access to just an hour for somebody to troubleshoot. So if you need to, if you have an off-premise network administrator or admin, or you're working with an MSP that needs access to a virtual machine to do some work, you can give them that restricted access rather than leaving port 3389 open. So if I go back to Security Center 2, you can see now in networking, in the networking environment, I have this one quick fix here, and you can see for one of two virtual machines. So I set up two virtual machines this morning. One of them, I blocked port 3389, the other one I did not. So here I could very easily just quick fix it. And hold on a sec. Sorry, my screen did not cooperate with me there. Go back in here, back in networking, into this quick fix, and here we go. Now it's behaving properly. And you can see I have a healthy resource here. My demo VM2 is fine. I blocked port 3389 when I set that one up. This one is not. I did not block that port. So I select this VM, I click remediate. It tells me here to set up just-in-time VM access configuration for this, for these ports. I click add. If I want to add another port, and you can see here, I could set the maximum request time up to 24 hours or as low as 1 hour. You can see by default, it puts a 3-hour range in these ports. And click save. And now this just-in-time VM access configuration is being created for this VM. And in a little while, I will be now healthy for both of my virtual machines within this networking, this specific network recommendation. So when I go back now to Security Center, and let's take a look at a few other things within here, you can see here with my resource Hygiene Health, I have multiple, 9 recommendations within here. 5 are high severity, 3 are medium, and 1 is low. So I can drill down within here to see all 9 of these recommendations. And you can see here, as I said, I get, a enable MFA. So I should, for any account with right permissions, I should have MFA enabled. So I don't have that, so I'm getting a bad rap on that one. You can see ones that I have here that are completed. I have vulnerabilities here. I should have vulnerability assessments enabled on virtual machines. Again, this is another quick fix where I can just hit quick fix. And I'm getting a delay here, but I won't worry about that. Let's look at something else here. Here's one that does not have a quick fix. Disk encryption should be applied on all virtual machines. So let's look at this one. And you can see here, I can't, I can do certain things within here, such as triggering logic app to monitor these resources. And you can read here what the description is, and we can then look at the remediation steps. So I don't have Azure Disk Encryption enabled on my virtual machines. So that means I'm not running BitLocker on those virtual machines at this time, which makes sense. I didn't set that up. I didn't put that extension on when I set up that virtual machine, but you can do that. And this gives that description of why that's doing that, and that it's a manual remediation, and it's got a link here that's going to take me out to Microsoft Docs and explain how to go about setting that up versus through group policy, or we can do that through PowerShell. Here's crypt and decrypt using PowerShell Quick Start. So we can go right through and do this. There's certain things you're going to have to do as well for as far as a process of getting this set up. One of those is setting up an Azure Key Vault, which I don't have set up either. So that's why there's a few different steps within here rather than just one simple step that has a quick fix. So that's why you get those remediation steps and then have to review some additional documentation to get in there. So that, that provides some helpful information there as well. So let's go out of there real quick. You can see now, because I enabled the just-in-time virtual machine access within my environment, notice my secure score went up from 18% to 42%, just like that. So you can really very easily, by taking the recommendations within the Azure environment and within Security Center, and increase your secure score and get yourself back to a healthy security posture. Let's look at the regulatory compliance pieces here, and you can see here, this just shows that I have the standard subscription. If it showed partially covered, you're never going to, unless you're in a legacy Azure environment, going to rarely see not covered anymore. Like I said, basic coverage, the free coverage is created when you create your Azure subscription now. So you're going to generally see partially covered right off the bat. If you've enabled the standard subscription, you can do fully covered. If you see partially covered and you come to the subscription coverage button, you can go in here and it sees that you're fully covered. It'll put you in partially covered, and it'll give you the ability to enable standard coverage for a free, I think 10 days or something like that. It might be a month, I can't remember. There's a lot of differences between the subscriptions and how they, what the free time period is. But so you could actually test drive Security Center and see if it is helpful to you, or maybe you have an audit coming up and you want to see how you are in terms of compliance to HIPAA or something like that. You could do that on a temporary basis as well. As I said, best practice is that you have the standard subscription ready to go and running at all times. There is a cost based on your virtual machines and your databases and things like that. And when you go to enable that subscription, it gives you that information. So in regulatory compliance, here's where you can now look at how you rate versus certain compliances. And here you've got your Azure CIS compliance and regulatory compliance. You can see I don't have a whole lot of stuff set up within here, but I do get, again, multi-factor authentication isn't enabled across all my users. It's enabled for my privileged users, but not my non-privileged users, which is a recommendation based on this compliancy. Let's look at ISO 27001, and you can see it's broken out just like ISO 27001's sections are broken out. And you can look at this and see from an internal organization, segregation of duties. I don't have 3 owners designated on my subscription. Or I don't have 3 owners. I should have a maximum of 3 owners. I have 2 owners on my subscription, but that makes me fail because I have more than 1 owner assigned to my subscription. So you should be at 1 owner to have both of these green based on ISO 27001. Access control. You can see in here, user management access. Again, I'm getting hit with privileged access rights in terms of my MFA. I don't have MFA account set up on all of my right permission accounts. So I have somebody with some sort of contributor level or owner level access that doesn't have MFA within my environment. So you can go through and step through these. You've got an ISO 27001 audit. You can look at where you're not compliant and look at the specific things and see what you're doing wrong. And you see most of my failures right now are around MFA within here. Cryptography, I'll probably get hit with the disk encryption. And yep, there's my disk encryption on the virtual machines. I don't have Azure disk encryption enabled, so I'm getting hit with that. To add another regulatory compliance, you can go right here to manage compliance policies, and this will put you right into Azure Policy Manager, into the different Azure policies. And you can see Here we've got, our default policy is enabled, and then you have your out of the box policies, and you can have a custom initiative that you create, or you can add more standards. So here you can have, again, if I want to enable NIST 853, I can do that here. If I'm in the UK and I need to adhere to UK standards, or here's Canadian standards, if we're HIPAA high trust, we can put those all in here as well by just selecting add and enabling that policy by just sitting here. It's already got my subscription scope and review and create. We can do that very easily as well. Once that, oh, I don't have any parameters, sorry. I don't have a log analytics account in here, so I can't do that right now. I'd have to do that, but if I go back here as well to policy, and I did want to show you the different definitions. You can see I have 3 different policies in here. Again, I have some non-compliance within my Security Center default, as we saw when we were in Security Center. If you go in here in definitions, you can see the different policies and initiatives. And as I was saying, you can see if I go into category and find regulatory compliance and filter on that, we can see there's some other regulatory compliances in here that did not come up in terms of within the compliance dashboard, but we can very easily put those within here, such as FedRAMP high and moderate policies. If you're dealing with the Motion Picture Association, there's one in here. That one's a new one, as well as Australia government protection is in here. But you can see here, like NIST 853 will probably hit on every single policy that you might possibly need, regardless of your country of origin. It has a lot of controls in place, so you can take that and compare that versus other policies. If you're in, say, looking at UK, if you're in Europe and required GDPR compliance, you could look at probably the UK policy and adapt that to yourself in Belgium, for example, and find your GDPR policy and do what you need to do to manage governance for that particular initiative based on these 64 policies that are in here. HIPAA high trust, same thing. There's 136 policies within here. You can create a custom policy and take that where you need to go for your particular organization. The last thing I wanted to show was around Azure Sentinel and how Azure Sentinel can then also take this to another level in terms of connecting to resources and investigating resources both in and outside of Azure. And as you can see here, I've already set up my Azure Sentinel environment. One of the key things in setting up Sentinel is you have to have a log analytics workbook created, workspace created and set up, and then connected to Azure Sentinel. And I've already done that previously because that takes a second to set up and I don't want to delay things. But what you can do then from here is you can see there is a whole list of services, and not all of them within here are Azure or Microsoft services. There you see Trend Micro, Zscaler. There are a lot of Palo Alto networks. So if you have third-party sources, especially for like your perimeter security, such as Palo Alto in place, you can connect to those services within here from this. I'm in this configuration data connectors area. So when you come into Azure, it pops you up in this overview area where we can look at a dashboard of anomalies or malicious events that are taking place. If we go into news and guides, we can get started, and it steps you through a 3-step process of getting Azure Sentinel created. But if we go right to data connectors, which is really your first start here, is that you can go in and start connecting things. If you have a Azure or an AWS service running, you can actually connect to CloudTrail right from in here. And you can see it actually steps you through all of the process and what you need to do. Again, can direct you to Microsoft Docs for how to connect CloudTrail and take those CloudTrail logs and feed them into Azure Sentinel. We're not going to do that one today, but I did want to show you how to quickly connect a few very easy ones. We have Azure Active Directory in here. Obviously, we want that. We'd like to have that connected. So we have Azure Active Directory. We want to watch our Azure Active Directory sign-ins, and you can see if you have prerequisites and it's within the Azure environment, it'll take a look and it will let you know how you are right off the bat and let you know if you're missing something. One that you might find is maybe you don't have an Azure Active Directory premium license. And so you have that license, and I already have that license. If you don't have that license, you may need to upgrade your services. But I already have that, so I can very easily grab my sign-in logs and audit logs and bring those into Azure Sentinel and monitor that information. A big reason for that is, as I was saying around Sentinel, is it will monitor anomalies and will look at sign-in anomalies and things of that nature. So if I refresh here, I should in a moment see a connected resource because I have connected Azure Active Directory. It might take a second there. Azure Security Center, again, as I stated, runs very closely and very tightly with Azure Sentinel and works together well, because where Security Center doesn't have the level of alerting and incident creation as a SIM does, like Sentinel, Azure Security Center can feed that information into Sentinel and create those alerts, and allow additional investigation to take place. So that's, I have my license, I have my subscription all taken care of. All I need to do is click connect, and my connection status, I'm that quickly connected right into Azure Sentinel. Another one is, we have our Microsoft 365 environment. We have Office 365. We want to monitor activity within there. So again, we open our connector page. Again, my workspace and my tenant permissions are all straight. You have to be a global administrator or a security administrator. If I wasn't logged in as that, it's going to flag that. And then I can monitor my Exchange and SharePoint activity right within here. Again, I've applied those changes. My connection status in a moment will turn over, and I should start seeing connected services within here as I am starting to see. Last one I wanted to show as well is a service within Microsoft 365, and that's Cloud App Security, which shows, we monitor and manage our applications that we have access to within Microsoft 365, and we can, can control what users are utilizing, such as if we don't want Dropbox to be utilized within our environment, we only want OneDrive to be utilized as our cloud data management tool and data storage tool. We can also look for anomalies within Cloud App Security and watch for alerts and do those things. And again, prerequisites here, it lets you know next steps. And if we want to create incidents, which again is recommended, we can very easily enable that. Our connection status very quickly goes to connected, and we are good to go there. And then as this information comes in and we're utilizing this information, then our threat management dashboard starts to populate, and we may find incidents in terms of what's being, what might be taking place in terms of anomalous activities and things like that, which we can also see in our dashboard. And then this becomes a very valuable tool for us, but it's only as valuable as what we put in place. So if we don't have strong policies that are feeding Azure Security Center, or we don't connect Azure Security Center to Azure Sentinel, that information is not going to come into Azure Sentinel. So, and so it's only as good as you plan and configure that environment, so that kind of summarize this whole discussion over the last hour is that it's important for you as an administrator within your organization that if you are working to uh, to manage security and governance within your organization is to plan what needs to be done and have that information with the business owners in terms of what the regulatory compliance requirements are and what our security requirements are up front as you start to bring the Azure infrastructure into your organization and to know how you're going to monitor, manage, and control that environment. So in summary, we covered a lot of information within the last hour and at kind of a high level, but you can find lots of other information on all of this on Azure Docs, or on Microsoft Docs, as well as I've done other talks that have gone deeper and wider in a lot of these. I have a full learning path uh, within Skill Me Up on both Azure Security Center and Azure Sentinel. So if you want to learn more about what we kind of hit at a high level, I recommend you go to those as well. But we talked about those policies and initiatives and how they can be used and create those rules to control organizational governance for subscriptions and resources. And then talked about the role that Azure Security Center can play to review and audit those policies and compliance controls. And then finally, we reviewed how like Azure Sentinel can be, and Azure Security Center can be used to monitor and maintain that policy and compliance and security within your organization for both Azure as well as some non-Azure resources as well. So I appreciate everybody's time today on this expert talk on using uh, Azure Security Center for governance and policy compliance. And my name is Dwayne Natwick. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, or you can ask them to unmute yourself and ask them to me now. All right, since there aren't any questions, I will close out the session. And again, thanks everybody for attending and have a great rest of your day.